Before we begin our discussion on using the levels palette here in Photoshop, I'm making this movie while recording working in Photoshop CS3, but the levels palette has been in existence since the first version of the software, and so it doesn't really matter whichever version of Photoshop that you're using for the following this tutorial. Any version of Photoshop will have a levels palette for you to use. Before I begin, I'm just going to rearrange my palettes here. I'm in the default workspace, and I can do that by rolling the mouse over this area of the what's the layers palette. So I'm going to click and drag and pull this away, just like so, and then I'm just going to close all of this area down, so that I can make some more room so you can easily understand what's going on. I've basically just arranged my palettes so that like this. Another way to do that, if you're in CS3, is to press the Shift and the Tab key and then press F7 on the keyboard. That's the way I like to work in Photoshop. As you'll see with the training movies which I make, I very rarely have any of the palettes on show other than the layers palette. If all of this confuses you and you want to find your layers palette, you can always find it here in the window menu, as where all the other palettes can be either shown or hidden. There we go, there's the layers palette, that's F7. So basically this is the layers palette on show there. And as I say, I've arranged my workspace like this is because this is the way I like to work, and it will make what's to follow far easier for you to see and understand. So I'm going to begin by opening up an image file. I've prepared some images in a folder here, and I've purposely doctored these images so that they're not quite right in more ways than one. Basically, I've flattened the images and made them so that the blacks are not quite black and the whites are not quite white, and just basically made them rather flat and dull and uninteresting. When an image first opens up in Photoshop, it may well open, depending on which version of Photoshop you're working in, it may end up inside a window like this. I never work in the windowed view, so I always press the F key to center the view on screen, and using CS3 I press the F key once more, which takes me into this mode where if I hold the space bar down, now I can pan the image around. That's in this particular viewing mode. Basically you can change your view mode by pressing the letter F. If I press F and F again, I'm basically just changing the type of view which I see my image displayed to me on screen, and you can try that by pressing the letter F on the keyboard. So there we go. If you're new to Photoshop and you're interested in making your first tonal contrast type adjustments using Photoshop, then most definitely your first point of call is using the levels palette. There are so many different ways of dealing with contrast and colour in Photoshop, but being at the beginning, you've got to start somewhere, and the levels palette adjustment is definitely the place where you should be going first. So to do that, I'm going to click in this area at the bottom of the layers palette, and I'm going to choose this command, which is levels, and there you can see the levels dialog box. This has remained the same since version 1 of the software, and as I said earlier, it doesn't matter which version of Photoshop you're using, the levels palette will look like this, apart from CS4, where you'll have to do some slight changes in order to see the levels palette looking like this. So what we're looking at here, this graph is going from left to right, is a graphical representation of the tonal values of your image, the brightness values of the image, and it's actually 256 levels of light going from left to right that the graph is displaying. I'm talking about this graph here. And we can instantly see in this file, I happen to know with this file that this area at the bottom should be black. Now at the moment it isn't black because I've doctored this file. It isn't quite black, and it should be black, and for the same reason the whites are not quite white and not quite bright enough. And that's shown to us here. This is the bright end of the scale. This is where the whites would be. This is where the midtones are, and this is where the shadow information is. And very simply, to correct your image, and it's very important that you do this to your images, every single image that you ever deal with should have what's called its full tonal contrast range. It should be using all of its full tonal contrast range, and at the moment this is falling short on both ends. You can see the graph falls short and there's a flat line at this side. Very simply, to fix this, you take this slider and move it into where the graph starts. And again with the blacks, we can see clearly that the blacks are not black. We move this in until we get a nice deep black there, and that's basically your first adjustment. You can see there. Now there's a preview switch here, and if I turn the switch, that was before, that's after, and you can see we've got some nice contrast there. And basically the midtone slider then is really up to you as the user, and depending how you want to interpret the image, but these corrections at either end are definitely required. They're adjustments that you have to make. The adjustment that you make with the gamma or the midtone slider is really, again, how you want to see the image. You may want to see those midtones brighter, or in this case my preference to the image would be to darken the midtones like this. And you can see that's that final adjustment. If I click OK, we're using an adjustment layer here. It's not permanent yet, and with the eyeball to the left there, if I click the eyeball, that's without the adjustment, so that's before, and that's after the adjustment, and that's with. And if you are happy with that adjustment, then you should really flatten these two layers, otherwise the file will save as a Photoshop format, and that might not necessarily be what you want for the image. So we'll go to the layer menu, and you can choose flatten image there, and when you do that, both these images will merge together, and then you can either save the file off as a copy or just simply save the file. That would be File, Save As if you want to make a copy, or Save if you want to make the changes permanent to this particular file. I'm not going to do that in this example, but that's what you would do. Now we're going to leave this movie here, and we'll talk a little bit more about levels with some more examples in the next movie.